Hello, Carroll Lutheran Village. I'm Annie, and I'm the Resident Life Coordinator, and I'm here today to share my doll collection. So we're starting off with my little buddy here, and his name is Jerry Mahoney, and he was part of a ventriloquist act. So you can see his mouth moving. He's not the best of shape, but still super cool. So as a little girl, I absolutely hated dolls. Barbies were the worst. I was doing all things that my brothers did. So I was running around, playing in the creek, fishing, catching crayfish, catching bugs, anything under the sun, but I did not like dolls. My parents were always taking weekend trips, so we would go to different places. My dad would just get the road map out and we would head to wherever he found. And one time he stumbled upon this place called Ashcombs, and there was a greenhouse, there were all kinds of boutique items, antiques, and there was ice cream. My mom was super excited, and I was just happy that there was ice cream. And on one of the many trips that we made there was an antique area. And in the antique case, I saw this little tin, which I'll show you later, about this big. And there was a little doll sitting in the top of it with a bunch of clothes underneath. And I just knew she wasn't meant to be played with, but I knew I wanted her. So I asked the woman how much she was. And she was $20, and to me that was like $1 million back then. So I brought my mom over and I showed her the doll, and she said, well, you can do some extra chores around the house and you can see if you can earn her. And I did, and she was still there, and you'll see why. And I paid the $20, and I'll never forget the woman opening the case and carrying her to the front. I was super excited to get a doll when I absolutely hated dolls. After that first purchase, I was completely hooked. And my friends now affectionately call my doll collection the Creepier the Better collection. So you'll get to see all of those shortly. So at this time I'm going to share my collection with you. The first two we have are, I'm going to talk about very briefly. They're basically China dolls. They're made out of bisque/porcelain. And they were not really good for children because children drop things and they would break and shatter into a million pieces along with the child's heart. So they weren't exactly the best thing to have for children growing up. After realizing that they weren't the best thing in the world for kids, they came up with the composite dolls, composition dolls. And the reason why the material, you can kind of see on this one's forehead, it looks like pressed wood. So they were unbreakable compared to the bisque dolls, but they were made out of sawdust and glue mixed together. So when they started they would paint over top. And over time they would start to peel. As you can see, many of these have peels and cracks, and all of their features were hand painted on, and some of them have real eyes and some of them have the painted on eyes. Many of their clothing items are completely handmade by someone. I do not restore any of my dolls or my dollhouse. I really like the fact that they look old, and I wonder where they've been and who they belong to and where they've traveled to and what things they were a part of. So I just leave them as they are. Composition dolls were made approximately from 1909 through the 1950s. The height of the market was in the 1920s through the 40s. You really cannot usually find small composite dolls. They're all about this size or larger. They didn't make them too large because they were extremely heavy and children couldn't handle them. So some of the dolls that you might know that were composite dolls, mama dolls, baby dolls, which I have, and then also Shirley Temple was huge. There were a lot of composite Shirley Temple dolls. In short, hard plastic caused the demise of the composition dolls in the late 40s. Companies finally created the first truly unbreakable doll out of hard plastic. If you dropped hard plastic, it didn't break. If you put it near fire, it didn't burn, like celluloid, which we're going to talk about now. And if you got it wet, it didn't completely fall apart, because with the composition dolls, because they were made of glue and sawdust, they would disintegrate. So hard plastic eventually replaced them. I'm just going to point out there's one black doll here. They're extremely hard to find. They weren't manufactured as the white baby dolls were. So they are rare and very special. I'm very happy to have that one. Our next collection are called Celluloid Dolls. And you may remember carnival dolls. These would be placed on canes, and you could throw a cane over the ring. You can see the little cane in her hand here. And if you got the ring over the cane, you would win one of these, and they were decorated up with feathers and all sorts of things. So in this collection, I have the Native Americans, and they're in their own little pile. These in the front are actually made for dollhouses. They are, you can kind of tell they look like they would be a mom type style doll. Yeah, their clothing. These are just another version of the carnival doll and would have been given away as carnival prizes as well. This one someone made into an angel. I don't think that was her original purpose, but that's what she became. And these two are very unique. They were cake toppers for a wedding. So you can see the bride and the groom there. Then we have a little Dutch doll, and she even has her little wooden shoes on, also homemade, you can tell if you get close. These are the smallest two I have. This one is the rarest because you can only imagine this thing is paper thin. If you stepped on it, it would be sawdust. So there'd be nothing left except for a little pile of plastic under your foot. This is my original doll that I was telling you about at the very beginning. I found her in the antique case. And as you can see, she has little holes in her head. She's extremely fragile. Her little feet, she has, was made in occupied Japan under there. I kept everything in the tin as it was. All the homemade yellowed clothing. In the very bottom of the tin, there's a little paper. And the young woman who owned her's name was Sarah Ort. And I always kept that in there because I thought it was pretty neat that I knew who owned her before me. Long before me. So with celluloid dolls, celluloid is actually highly flammable, highly breakable, and if you want to know if it's truly a celluloid doll, you have to rub on it very hard and create some kind of heat, friction, and it'll have a smell to it, a very pungent smell. I've never tried it, but anyway, that's what they said. You can tell by that. It was one of the first synthetic plastics ever created. It was made in 1863, but most dolls were not made with it until about the 30s, like these. It was not a perfect plastic because it was highly flammable, deteriorated quickly, and it was prone to cracking and yellowing. It helped to replace some of the composite dolls, and it wasn't, if they were careful, it wasn't quite as fragile. If it got wet, it was okay. They were produced into the late 50s, or as late as the 50s. But the vast majority were produced from the 1900s through the 1940s. They can range in sizes, but they were never made very big because they are so fragile. Companies in Germany, France, Italy, and Japan, and the United States are among the hundreds that have produced celluloid dolls. Kewpies, German dolly face dolls, French fashion dolls, baby dolls, national costume dolls, and many others were made. But the most popular of all, of course, were the carnival dolls. So a lot of the ones you see here would have been given as prizes at a carnival because they were so cheap to make. On a side note, many other things were made out of celluloid, such as buttons, miniature animals, Christmas decorations, and even the pen that Anne Frank wrote her diary with was made out of celluloid. Celluloid doll and toy production ended in the early 50s when a much harder and durable plastic was created. So now we're going to step over here, and this is kind of my hodgepodge collection. But as I was telling you, I only have one celluloid animal, a little swan, but you can see how fragile it is. It's actually cracked in the bottom. This is unique. When I bought these, I was told not to take them out of the container. They are actually made of lead. And they made these for children. And so they're in this little glass jar, and I've never taken them out since I bought them. This was one of the first plastic babies to be made. It's super tiny. I should say one of the first small plastic babies to be made. I bought this in an antique store. And they had a history, a little paper about it, but it is one of the very first small plastic babies to be made. I brought this along because it's just funny. It's a glass baby bottle, which they gave the children to play with their baby dolls. It's teeny tiny and it's made of glass, and we wouldn't dream of doing that today. This is an Amish doll, and as you know, Amish dolls do not have any faces because it's considered to be a graven image, so they don't have faces. But this is a very, very old one. She is made out of sheep's wool is what's on the inside. I'm not quite sure what this material is, but she had a hole and I had to sew it, and it was definitely wool inside. This is a nun doll, and she's very special to me because before I came here, I worked with retired sisters for 19 years, and one of them made sure that I received that before she passed away. And then this one is from a sister named Sister Maria Rosa, and her mother made it for a friend of hers. And before that friend passed away, she wanted Sister Maria to have it back. So as you can see, it was very well loved and worn. This is Miss Scarlett O'Hara, and if you flip it, this is Miss Mamie. And you can see she fixed it herself. She actually used a slipper sock, but she wanted to make sure that I received that, so that's very special to me because she knew I love dolls. And the last one you may recognize, maybe, whoops, there we go. This was a baby powder dispenser. So if you can see all the little holes in the head, this was sold and many times given as a baby shower gift, and people would crochet doll clothes to put on it. But the baby powder was in there, and you would sprinkle it out, and you would have your baby powder. But just another unique little item. And the last thing we're going to talk about are doll houses. And miniature homes furnished with domestic articles and resident inhabitants, both people and animals, have been made for thousands of years. The earliest known examples were found in the Egyptian tombs of the Old Kingdom, created nearly 5,000 years ago. These wooden models of servants, furnishings, boats, livestock, and pets were placed in the pyramids, almost certainly were made for religious purposes. Later on, the Europeans started making them, and they were quite elaborate, and children were not allowed to play with them. They actually cost some of them, because they were miniature, as much as a brand new home did, because it was such a delicate artistry to make tiny furniture. This one I came upon in an old antique store. It was $5 because it's not in the best of shape. Truly homemade. Everything on here, like little hooks, and you can tell it's plywood, and somebody put all kinds of different paper and textures to create it, the brick and the shingles. And they decorated it, made a handmade door with the drawn lines. So I fixed it up a bit. Oops, she fell over. So this is what the inside looks like. Different rooms. And this was done very inexpensively. I just wanted to have fun with it and, you know, fixed it up as best as I could. This is one of the rare, tiny composite dolls that we were talking about. They're very rare because there just aren't many of them. It's teeny tiny. And so then we'll flip it to the other side. And here's our other part of the house. Once again, just a little hook to close it up. This is made like a traditional European dollhouse. Whoever made it, they are cabinet style where they open up, whereas dollhouses in the United States were actually made more with just the open back. So you could, you know, look at the front of the house, see the front of the house, and look at the back, and that's where all of the rooms and furniture would be. So somebody had more of the European flair when they made this one. And that is all I have for you, but thank you for joining me for my tour of my old creepy dolls. Have a wonderful day. Bye.